everybody, Bridget here, and yes, I did get a haircut. With it being 90+ degrees Fahrenheit outside, I decided the wisest thing to do would be to chop my hair off. So yeah, that's gone. Thus, this. Anyways, it is August 2nd, so I'm here to film my July wrap-up. I read a total of 8 books for the month of July, which was good, except for that we had the booktubeathon going on this month, so my goal, because of that, was actually to read closer to 15 books, but that didn't happen, because immediately after booktubeathon, I just stopped reading altogether, except for maybe like one book, which took me the entirety of right after booktubeathon to the very last day of July to finish reading, and it was less than 300 pages. So that shows you how motivated I was to read. Anyways, let's get back to the wrap-up. As always, I will go in the order of which I read them and give you my ratings for each book. The very first book that I started out reading in July was City of Fallen Angels by Cassandra Clare. This is book 4 in the Mortal Instruments series. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I was a little bit worried about this book because the ending for book 3 was so good. I didn't know where Cassandra could go next in the storyline, but I really enjoyed it. I did enjoy Simon's parts better than I did the whole storyline between Jace and Clary. Actually, they started to annoy me at points in the book, and so the only thing that really kept me going for this particular volume was Simon. And I also really liked the little tiny tie-ins that they did with this and the Infernal Devices series, so that was always a plus too. So that's why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in July was Ink by Amanda Sun. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. I was not a big fan of it. I seriously had to force myself to read this book. You guys have no idea. I was super excited to read this book when I heard about it. I requested it many times before it was released and got denied every time, so immediately when it came out, I ran straight to the bookstore and bought it because it is set in Japan, and I love anything that is set in Japan, so I will read anything that is. And so I was really looking forward to reading this, and I got it, took it home, and immediately started reading it, and it was crash and burn. I didn't really enjoy this book at all. It had any cliche YA plot line you could think of was in this book. I know that it is a book that's trying to teach you about the Japanese culture and everything, but I kind of think it just took it a little bit too far with the Japanese culture. I mean, there's a freaking glossary in the back of Japanese words because she uses Japanese in here so much. I'm sorry, but the characters are supposed to be speaking Japanese. You don't need to repeat the word in Japanese and then also in English. We get it, you're speaking Japanese. You don't need to basically teach us a foreign language in the book. I did not like that aspect at all. The main character was boring, flat, she had no personality to her at all. She was whiny the entire time. I cannot believe I finished this book because I was seriously reading it going, why am I reading this book? Why am I reading this book? In fact, I hardly ever do this, but I marked points in the book that I didn't like. It got 2 out of 5 stars because it was set in Japan. Otherwise, probably would have gotten a 1 star for me. After that, I didn't really read anything until booktubeathon started. So for the beginning of booktubeathon, I went ahead and jumped into my main challenge that I wanted to complete, and that was my Finish a Series challenge. And if you watched my daily updates, you know that the series that I read was Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, and I had already previously read the first 2 books, so I only had the last 3. So, of course, the first one I picked up was The Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan, and again, this is book 3 in the series. Really enjoyed this series, gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This book series was amazing, so amazing. Every single book in this series was so fast-paced and action-packed, and each ending was a serious cliffhanger, and I was so glad that I had the entire series because had I actually read this when it first came out, I don't know how those of you who did read it when it came out dealt with it because I was craving to read the next book like immediately and was glad that I had him. And of course, on from there, I read Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan. This is book 4 in the series, and probably one of my favorites in the entire series. It was so good. I can't think of the words to use to express how good this is. Yeah. And then I kind of wanted to savor the last book, so I didn't read that one. Instead, I changed paces and went with a different challenge for the readathon. And so I decided to finish my read 500 or more pages challenge. And so for that one, I read Tatiana and Alexander by Paulina Simons. This is book 2 in the Bronze Horseman trilogy. And I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I love this series so much. The first book is probably one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. There's different types of stories, but I'm going to say that it is one of the greatest love stories I've ever read, ever. But this is the second book in the trilogy, and the reason I gave this 4 out of 5 stars is because although it was super good and I enjoyed it very much, there was a lot less romance in this particular volume and more war and fighting related stuff going on in this one, which it was still a very good read, and I still read this book in a day because it was that good, but I didn't find it as captivating as the first book, but still really good, and I do plan on getting to the third book here soon. Then, of course, I wanted to finish my series, so I read Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. This is the 5th and final book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. What an ending. What an ending to this series. It was like the perfect ending to this book series. I loved it. This particular volume is probably my favorite when it comes to seeing Percy's development as a hero. He definitely steps up as a leader and takes charge of what's going on in the war and the battle. He just becomes this amazing, legendary hero. He definitely had the most character growth in this particular one, and I really, really enjoyed that, and it was a perfect ending. Definitely has tie-ins to the other series by Rick Riordan, the Heroes of Olympus series, and it really, the ending of this book really made me want to read that, so I have it, and that is definitely going to be in my TBR for August. So then the next book I read was also the last book that I read for Booktubeathon, and that one is Witch and Wizard by James Patterson. This is the physical copy, but I actually listened to the audiobook. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. This was my first audiobook. I've never listened to a book before this, and it just wasn't something that I was into. I would constantly get distracted and then forget what happened, and I would have to rewind it and re-listen to it, and I just didn't like that. I think my concentration is better when I'm actually physically looking at the words on the page. And then the last and final finished book that I read in July is Angel Fall by Susan E. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This book was amazing. Definitely not what I was expecting from this book at all. It is a lot darker and creepier than it seems like it would be for a book about angels. It is basically about evil angels this time, but there are very detailed, gory scenes in this book, and very dark and twisted, and I loved every bit of it. It was amazing. I am working on a written review for this, that's why I have all these tabs. The ending. I looked up immediately after finishing the second book, and it comes out in November, and I cannot wait to read this. Cannot wait to read this. It was so good. So, amazing book, 5 out of 5 stars. Those are the books that I completed in July, but I was in the middle of 2 other books when the month ended. The first one being The Hunt by Andrew Fukuda. I got about 77 pages into this book and then put it down. It is not catching my attention. I don't know what it is about this story, but I just can't find the motivation to continue reading this, and I'm gonna try and finish it this month, but I've already started reading other stuff, so who knows if I'll get back to this, but it's okay. And then the last book that I was in the middle of reading is one that is on my e-reader, and I don't have it on me right now, and that book is Something Strange and Deadly by Susan Dennard, and I am about 7 chapters in, so I'm not too far, but I'm really enjoying it so far. It is basically like zombie, steampunk, Victorian age, kind of historical. Really, really good, so I cannot wait to finish continuing that book. So yeah, those were all the books that I read in July, If you have anything to say about any of the books that I've mentioned, please leave your comments down below, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.